Sarah Chen walked through the gleaming corridors of the Universal Jewelry Emporium, her simple human features standing out among the sea of alien faces. The massive space station orbited the galactic capital, serving customers from 1,000 different worlds. Crystal displays showcased treasures that could buy entire star systems, while holographic advertisements promised immortality through precious stones and metals unknown to Earth. She wore no crown or royal insignia, just a modest blue dress that her grandmother might have worn to church back on Earth. Her wedding ring was equally simple, a plain band of Terran gold that looked pathetically ordinary compared to the quantum diamonds and stellar pearls surrounding her. Most shoppers assumed she was a servant or perhaps a translator for some wealthy alien patron. The Zephyrian sales clerk, standing nearly 8 feet tall with crystalline skin that refracted light in rainbow patterns, barely glanced at Sarah as she approached the counter. His forearms continued polishing an ornate necklace that seemed to contain a miniature galaxy within its centerpiece. When Sarah cleared her throat softly, he finally looked down at her with obvious irritation. "Yes, human? Are you lost? The service tunnels are on level 47, he said in heavily accented Galactic standard, his voice carrying the musical tones typical of his species but twisted with contempt. Several nearby customers, a group of wealthy Andromedan merchants with their jewel-encrusted carapaces, stopped their conversation to watch the interaction with amusement. Sarah smiled patiently, though her brown eyes flashed with something deeper. "I'd like to see your collection of Viridian sunset stones, please. I understand you have some exceptional pieces." The clerk's crystal features somehow managed to convey a sneer. "Viridian sunset stones start at 50,000 galactic credits. Perhaps you're looking for the synthetic jewelry section. It's in the lower levels with the other budget options." He gestured dismissively toward a service elevator, causing the Andromedan merchants to click their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind. "I'm aware of the pricing," Sarah replied calmly. "I'd still like to see your finest pieces." The clerk exchanged a look with his supervisor, a hulking Rigelian whose rocky skin glowed with embedded minerals. The supervisor lumbered over, each step causing the floor to vibrate slightly. "Is there a problem here, Kethvar? Are we having security issues with the humans again?" "No security issue, Manager Thulnak. This human seems to think she can afford our premium collection. I was about to direct her to more appropriate merchandise for her species." Kethvar's 4 hands gestured in a complex pattern that was extremely rude in 17 different alien cultures. Sarah felt the familiar weight of being judged by her appearance, something that had followed her even to the stars. On Earth, she had been just another face in the crowd. Here, 3 billion light-years from home, she was an oddity, a member of a species barely a century into space travel, standing in a store that catered to civilizations older than her planet. "Listen, little human," Manager Thulnak's voice rumbled like grinding stone. "These stones are mined from the hearts of dying stars. They're older than your entire solar system. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the Human Quarters gift shop. I believe they sell nice glass beads there." The crowd of onlookers had grown larger, drawn by the spectacle of a human being put in her place. A family of Centaurian nobles watched with their characteristic empty black eyes, while a group of young vegan traders recorded the interaction on their neural implants, already composing social media posts about the amusing human who forgot her station. Sarah reached into her small purse and pulled out a credit chip. It looked identical to billions of others throughout the galaxy, a simple rectangle of programmed matter that could store virtually unlimited financial data. "I believe this should cover the purchase. Could you please scan it?" Kethvar actually laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Oh, this is rich. You actually have a credit chip. Let me guess, your life savings. Maybe enough for a small synthetic crystal?" He made a show of taking the chip, waving it dramatically before placing it in the scanner. "Let's see what a human considers real money." The scanner beeped once, twice, then began emitting a tone none of them had ever heard before. The small display screen flickered, showing numbers that climbed rapidly past the usual credit amounts. Past 1 million, past 1 billion, past 1 trillion. The numbers became exponential, represented in scientific notation as the scanner struggled to process the vast wealth encoded in the simple chip. Manager Thulnak leaned forward, his mineral-embedded eyes widening. That can't be right. Scanner, run diagnostic protocols." His voice had lost its mocking tone. "Diagnostic complete. the store's AI announced in perfect Galactic standard. Credit verification confirmed. Account holder, Empress Sarah Chen, Sovereign Consort of the Galactic Empire, Supreme Commander of the Terran Fleet, Protector of 1,000 worlds. Available credit limit, unlimited Imperial access. The jewelry store fell completely silent. Even the ambient hum of the space station's life support system seemed to pause in respect. Kethvar's forehands trembled as he stared at the display, his crystalline skin shifting from its usual rainbow pattern to a pale, terrified white. Manager Thulnak's rocky exterior began to crack audibly as stress fractures appeared across his face. Sarah smiled the same patient smile she had worn throughout the encounter. Now then, about those Viridian sunset stones. I'd like to see your entire collection, please. My husband is expecting me home soon, and I'd hate to keep the Emperor waiting. The credit chip in the scanner continued to pulse with soft golden light, each flash a reminder that the simple human woman standing before them commanded resources that could buy and sell entire star systems. The joke, it seemed, was no longer on her. Word of the incident spread through the Universal Jewelry Emporium like wildfire, then beyond to the space station's communication networks, and finally across the galaxy itself. Within hours, every major news outlet in known space was running the story of how the Empress of the Galaxy had been treated like a common vagrant by ignorant store clerks. Kethvar sat in his quarters, his crystalline skin flickering between terror white and shame gray. As he watched his own humiliation played back on galactic news feeds, his forehands shook as commentators from dozens of species discussed the incident at the jewelry store. The most damning footage came from the Vegan trader's neural recordings, showing every detail of his condescending behavior in crystal clear quality. This reporter has learned that Empress Sarah Chen purchased nearly 500,000 credits worth of jewelry before leaving the store, announced Trilana Vex, the galaxy's most watched news anchor. Her serpentine features remained perfectly composed as she delivered the devastating details. Sources indicate that Her Imperial Majesty was gracious throughout the encounter, even tipping the staff generously despite their unprofessional conduct. Manager Thulnak paced his office like a caged animal, each heavy step causing his collection of awards and certificates to rattle on the walls. The Rigelian's rocky skin had developed deep stress fractures that glowed with an ominous orange light. His communication console hadn't stopped chiming with incoming messages. Corporate executives, government officials, and worst of all, representatives from the Imperial Palace. The store's parent company, Galactic Luxury Enterprises, had already issued 3 public apologies, each more groveling than the last. Their stock price had plummeted as investors realized the implications of insulting the Emperor's wife. Trade agreements hung in the balance, and entire sectors of their business faced potential Imperial sanctions. "Sir?" His assistant's voice trembled over the intercom. "There's another call for you. It's from the Imperial Communication Authority." Thulnak's massive form sagged against his desk. He had been dreading this moment since the scanner had revealed Sarah's true identity. "Put them through," he rumbled, his voice barely audible. The holographic display activated, showing the imposing figure of Admiral Kexthon, the Emperor's personal aide-de-camp. The Altarian's 6 eyes glowed with cold fury, and his ceremonial armor bore the twin-star insignia of the Imperial Guard. When he spoke, his words carried the absolute authority of the Galactic Throne. "Manager Thulnak of the Universal Jewelry Emporium, you and your employee Kethvar will present yourselves at the Imperial Palace tomorrow at the 6th hour. You will answer for the treatment of Her Imperial Majesty, Sarah Chen, Empress of the Galaxy. Any attempt to avoid this summons will be considered an act of treason against the Crown." The transmission ended before Thulnak could respond, leaving him alone with the weight of his approaching judgment. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place as the full scope of the incident became clear to those responsible. Meanwhile, in the opulent chambers of the Imperial Palace, Emperor Zarthax paced before the massive windows that overlooked the galactic capital. His imposing form, nearly 10 feet of scaled muscle and natural armor, moved with the fluid grace of a born predator. The draconian ruler's eyes glowed with a dangerous amber light as he reviewed the security footage his intelligence service had provided. "They dared to humiliate my Sarah," he growled, his voice carrying harmonics that could shatter glass. The Emperor's tail lashed behind him, a sure sign of his mounting rage. They treated the Empress of the Galaxy like a beggar in the street. His chief advisor, the ancient and wise counselor Vectar, stood respectfully nearby. The elderly Arcturian had served 3 emperors during his long life, and understood the delicate balance of justice and mercy that kept the galaxy stable. Your Majesty, perhaps a measured response would be most appropriate. The offenders clearly acted in ignorance, and the Empress herself showed remarkable restraint. Emperor Zarthax turned from the window, his massive form casting shadows across the ornate chamber. Ignorance? Ignorance. His roar echoed through the palace corridors. My wife has visited that store before. Her face has been broadcast across every world in the Empire. There is no excuse for such treatment of Sarah. The Emperor's rage was legendary throughout the galaxy. Entire fleets had surrendered rather than face his wrath on the battlefield. Star systems had bent the knee at the mere threat of his displeasure. Yet those who knew him personally understood that his fury was always coldest when it concerned his beloved human wife. Summon the Minister of Interspecies Relations, Zarthax commanded, and contact the Human Rights Commission. I want a full review of how humans are being treated throughout our empire. If this incident is representative of a larger pattern, there will be consequences. Counselor Vectar bowed his ancient head. It shall be done, Your Majesty. And the store employees? The Emperor's eyes narrowed to burning slits. They will learn why insulting the Empress of the Galaxy is considered one of the most foolish acts possible in civilized space. Prepare the full ceremonial court. Tomorrow's audience will be one that the galaxy remembers. As night fell over the capital, emergency sessions convened in corporate boardrooms across the galaxy. The Universal Jewelry Emporium's parent company faced potential bankruptcy as the Emperor's displeasure became clear. Other businesses that catered to galactic nobility quickly reviewed their staff training protocols, desperately hoping they had never shown similar disrespect to the deceptively simple human woman who ruled alongside the most powerful. Being in known space, the irony was not lost on political commentators across the galaxy. Sarah Chen, the human woman from a backwater planet, had once again demonstrated why her species had risen so quickly in galactic affairs, not through force or intimidation, but through quiet dignity in the face of prejudice. Her restraint had made the insult all the more obvious, and her grace under pressure had turned a moment of personal humiliation into a galactic incident that would reshape how humans were perceived throughout the Empire. Tomorrow would bring justice, and the galaxy would learn once again why underestimating humans, especially the Emperor's human wife, was a mistake that few survived intact. The Imperial throne room had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, but rarely had it hosted an audience quite like this one. Massive columns of crystallized starlight supported a ceiling that displayed the real-time movement of galaxies, while the floor beneath was carved from a single piece of neutron star matter that had been compressed into decorative stone. Representatives from every major species in the Empire filled the observation galleries, their various forms of recording equipment capturing every moment for posterity. Kethvar and manager Tholnak knelt before the throne of stars, their forms dwarfed by the magnificent seat that seemed to contain an actual miniature cosmos within its structure. The Zephyrian's crystalline skin had lost all color, cycling through a sickly transparent hue that revealed his internal bioluminescent organs, flickering with terror. Beside him, the massive Rigelian's rocky exterior had developed so many stress fractures that small pieces of mineral were flaking off onto the pristine floor. Emperor Zarthax sat upon his throne like a living mountain, his draconian features carved from some primordial nightmare of scales and fangs. The ceremonial armor of galaxies adorned his massive frame, each piece inscribed with the names of worlds he had conquered and peoples he had united under imperial rule. His amber eyes burned with controlled fury as he regarded the 2 creatures who had dared insult his beloved wife, Kethvar, of Zephyria Prime, and Tholnak of Rigel 7. The Emperor's voice rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. You stand accused of showing disrespect to Her Imperial Majesty, Sarah Chen, Empress of the Galaxy and sovereign consort of the throne. How do you answer these charges? Kethvar's forearms trembled as he attempted to speak. Your Imperial Majesty, we did not know. We never realized— Silence! The Emperor's roar caused several pieces of delicate crystal artwork to shatter in the galleries above. You did not know? The Empress of the Galaxy visited your establishment, And you claim ignorance of her identity? Admiral Kexthon stepped forward from his position beside the throne, his 6 eyes scanning the accused with military precision. Your Majesty, our investigation has revealed that this was not an isolated incident. Review of security footage from the past year shows a pattern of discriminatory behavior toward human customers at this establishment. A holographic display materialized above the kneeling figures, showing compilation footage from the jewelry store. Scene after scene played out showing human customers being directed to cheaper sections, being questioned about their ability to pay, or being outright ignored while alien patrons received preferential treatment. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. Furthermore, Admiral Kexthon continued, his voice cutting through the shocked murmurs from the gallery, intelligence reports indicate that anti-human sentiment has been growing in certain sectors of the Empire, fueled partly by the assumption that humans are somehow lesser beings due to their recent entry into galactic civilization. Emperor Zarthax rose from his throne, his full height nearly touching the energy field that contained the miniature galaxies above. Is this how we treat the species that gave us our Empress? The people who have brought innovation, courage, and wisdom to our empire. His voice carried to every corner of the massive chamber. Let me remind you all of something that some seem to have forgotten. The Emperor gestured, and new holographic displays appeared throughout the throne room. Images of human achievements filled the air, colonies thriving in impossible conditions, human scientists making breakthrough discoveries, human diplomats negotiating peace between ancient enemy species, and human soldiers fighting alongside alien comrades in defense of imperial worlds. Humans have been part of our empire for only 50 standard years, Zarthax declared, his voice rising with passion. In that time, they have established colonies on worlds that other species declared uninhabitable. They have solved problems that had puzzled our greatest minds for millennia. They have died protecting worlds they had never seen, defending people they had just met. The holographic displays shifted to show Sarah herself, not in her role as Empress, but in the years before her marriage. Images of her working as a xenobiologist, developing medical treatments that had saved millions of alien lives. Footage of her as a diplomatic attaché, preventing a war between the Centaurians and the Vegan Confederacy through patient negotiation. Pictures of her personally distributing emergency supplies during the Andromedan plague crisis. My wife, the Emperor continued, his voice now carrying a note of profound love and respect, earned her place at my side not through birth or conquest but through her actions and character. She chose to marry me not for power or position, but because she believed in the dream of a truly united galaxy, where all species could thrive together. Thulnak finally found his voice, though it emerged as barely a whisper. Your Majesty, we were wrong. Completely and utterly wrong. There is no excuse for our behavior. No, the Emperor agreed, settling back onto his throne. There is not. But your punishment will serve a greater purpose than simple retribution. Admiral Kexthon stepped forward with a formal scroll made from Altarian, memory silk that would preserve the Emperor's words for eternity. By imperial decree, the following sentence is hereby proclaimed. Kethvar and Thulnak are stripped of their positions and barred from working in customer service throughout the Empire. However, they will not be imprisoned or exiled. The gallery erupted in surprised murmurs. Many had expected far harsher punishment for insulting the Empress. Instead, the Admiral continued, they will spend the next 5 years working without pay for the Human Integration Authority, personally assisting human immigrants in finding housing, employment, and social connections throughout the Empire. They will learn firsthand the contributions that humans make to our civilization. Emperor Zarthax leaned forward, his amber eyes fixing on the 2 kneeling figures. You will discover what I learned long ago, that judging any being by their species, their appearance, or their origins is the mark of a small mind. You will learn to see the individual rather than the stereotype. Furthermore, the Emperor announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the Empire through the broadcast networks, let this serve as notice to all citizens of our realm. Discrimination against any species, including humans, will not be tolerated. We are an empire united not by force alone, but by shared values of dignity, respect, and mutual cooperation. As the formal ceremony concluded and the condemned were led away to begin their sentence, whispers began in the gallery. The Emperor's message had been clear. The time when humans could be treated as second-class citizens in their own empire was over. The quiet strength that Sarah had shown in the jewelry store had triggered a reckoning that would reshape attitudes across the galaxy. The irony was perfect in its human way. By refusing to use her power to intimidate, Sarah had demonstrated a strength that no amount of force could match. Her restraint had turned an insult into a teaching moment for an entire galaxy. 3 months after the Imperial Judgment, the ripple effects of the jewelry store incident continued to reshape galactic society in ways that no one had anticipated. The Human Integration Authority, once a small department buried within the imperial bureaucracy, had become one of the most influential agencies in the Empire. Its offices on 1,000 worlds bustled with activity, as species after species requested cultural exchange programs with human communities. Dr. Veltara, the Andromedan xenopsychologist, who had been skeptical of human capabilities, now stood before a packed auditorium on Centauri Prime delivering a lecture titled The Cognitive Advantages of Adaptive Evolution. Her jeweled carapace gleamed under the lights as she gestured to holographic displays showing human neural scans. What we initially interpreted as primitive simplicity, she explained to her mixed audience of alien academics, has proven to be extraordinary cognitive flexibility. While our species evolved specialized thinking patterns over millions of years, humans retained the ability to rapidly adapt their mental processes to new situations. In the audience, a young Rigelian student raised her rocky hand. "Professor, is it true that humans can learn our mathematical concepts in weeks when it takes our children years?" "Doctor." Veltara's mandibles clicked in what her species used for a smile. "Not only is it true, but human students at our universities are now outperforming native students in several advanced disciplines. Their brains simply wire themselves differently for each new challenge. It's unprecedented in our studies of galactic intelligence." Meanwhile, in the industrial sector of vegan space, the Korthak Mining Consortium had discovered something remarkable about their human employees. The asteroid mining operation that had initially hired humans as cheap labor now found itself completely dependent on human innovation. Where other species saw raw rock, humans saw possibilities. Chief Engineer Zachris, a vegan whose insectoid features twitched with excitement, stood before the consortium's board of directors presenting quarterly reports that defied belief. "The humans have increased our efficiency by 300%, he clicked in rapid vegan. But that's not the remarkable part. The holographic display showed a cross-section of an asteroid that should have been worthless, mostly iron with traces of rare elements too scattered to mine profitably. Human team leader Martinez looked at this rock that we were going to discard and saw something we missed. They developed a new extraction technique that turned our waste into our most profitable operation." Board chairwoman Tika Ara's compound eyes focused intently on the data. "How is this possible? Our mining algorithms have been perfected over centuries." "The humans don't think in algorithms," Zachris explained. "They think in possibilities. Where we see constraints, they see puzzles to solve. They've revolutionized 17 different mining techniques in the past quarter alone. But perhaps the most significant changes were happening in the military academies throughout the Empire. Admiral Kexthon himself had mandated that all officer candidates study human military history and tactical thinking. What they discovered challenged fundamental assumptions about warfare and strategy. At the Imperial War College on Altair, Cadet Threnak from Rigel 7 struggled to understand a human tactical manual. The massive young warrior's rock-like features creased in concentration as he studied the Battle of Thermopylae, a conflict that had taken place millennia ago on ancient Earth. "Instructor Vextor," he rumbled, raising a boulder-sized fist. "This makes no tactical sense. 300 warriors against hundreds of thousands. The humans should have surrendered or retreated to fight another day." The veteran Arcturian instructor, his ancient features bearing the scars of a dozen campaigns, smiled with genuine fondness. "Ah, but you're thinking like a Rigelian, cadet. Your species values survival and logical retreat. Humans sometimes value something more than survival." "What could be more valuable than staying alive to fight again?" asked Cadet Silvera, a young Centaurian whose black eyes reflected her species' practical nature. "The idea itself," Instructor Vextor replied. Those 300 humans died, yes. But their deaths inspired their entire species to resist an invasion that seemed unstoppable. They turned a military defeat into a moral victory that changed the course of history. The classroom fell silent as alien minds struggled to grasp the concept. Finally, Cadet Threnak spoke again, his voice uncertain. "You're saying humans will die for ideas? For concepts that have no physical form?" "More than that," the instructor continued. "They'll live for them, work for them, sacrifice comfort and safety for them. That's why the Empress could stand in that jewelry store and smile while being insulted. She wasn't just representing herself, she was representing the idea that all beings deserve dignity and respect, regardless of their origins." Back on the capital world, Sarah Chen stood in her private garden, a small oasis of earth flora that she had carefully cultivated within the imperial palace. The roses and daisies seemed impossibly delicate compared to the massive crystalline flowers that grew naturally on the palace grounds, but they served as a connection to her distant home. Emperor Zarthax found her there, as he often did when the weight of ruling a galaxy grew heavy. His massive draconian form moved with surprising gentleness among the fragile earth plants as he approached his wife. The weekly intelligence reports just came in, he rumbled softly, his voice losing the imperial tone it carried in public. Anti-human incidents are down by 70% across the empire. More importantly, applications for cultural exchange programs are at an all-time high. Sarah smiled, her fingers gently touching a rose bloom. It's funny how one bad day at a jewelry store can change so much. "It wasn't the store incident that changed things," Zarthax replied, settling his massive bulk carefully on a bench designed to support his weight. "It was your response to it. The galaxy saw strength without violence, dignity without arrogance. They saw what I fell in love with all those years ago. Sometimes I wonder if we're doing enough." Sarah mused, her brown eyes distant. There are still so many barriers between the species, so much misunderstanding. The Emperor's great head turned to study his human wife, marveling as always at the complexity of thought that could exist in such a seemingly fragile form. "My dear Sarah, you've started something that will outlast both our lifetimes. The seed is planted. Now we just have to tend the garden and watch it grow." As if summoned by their words, Admiral Kexthan appeared at the garden's entrance, his 6 eyes bright with excitement. "Your Majesties, forgive the interruption, but you need to see the latest reports from the Outer Rim colonies." The holographic display he activated showed a scene that would have been impossible just months earlier. Human and alien children playing together in the dusty streets of a frontier mining town. Rigelian youngsters, their rocky skin gleaming in the alien sun, chased human children in a game of tag while their parents, representatives of a dozen different species, worked together on a construction project. "This is Colony World Kepler 442, Admiral Kexthan explained. 3 months ago it was failing because the different species couldn't cooperate. Now it's become a model for interspecies integration. The children, it seems, don't care about the old prejudices." Sarah watched the display with tears in her eyes, remembering her own childhood on Earth and the simple joys of friendship untainted by adult prejudices. "The children understand what we adults make so complicated," she whispered, "that we're all just people trying to make a life among the stars." The Emperor's massive hand gently covered his wife's smaller one. The jewelry store incident had been embarrassing and painful, but it had also been the catalyst for change that the Empire desperately needed. Sometimes it seemed the smallest human gesture could reshape entire galaxies. 6 months after the Imperial judgment, Kethvar stood in the crowded arrival terminal of New Shanghai Station, holding a simple sign that read, "Welcome new citizens," in 17 different languages. His crystalline skin, once shifted through rainbow patterns of pride and disdain, now maintained a steady, warm golden hue that reflected genuine contentment. The Zephyrian's forearms efficiently juggled data tablets, welcome packets, and communication devices as he coordinated the arrival of the day's newest human immigrants. "Transport 77 Alpha has arrived from Earth Sector," announced the station's AI. "Passengers include 43 human families seeking relocation to agricultural worlds in the Vegan Confederation. Beside Kethvar, A young human woman named Elena Rodriguez checked her own tablet. As a Human Integration Authority coordinator, she had been assigned to work alongside the former jewelry store clerk as part of a revolutionary partnership program. What had started as supervision of his sentence had evolved into genuine collaboration. "The Vasquez family is on that transport," Elena noted, her English-accented Galactic standard carrying hints of warmth that the universal translators couldn't quite capture. "They're farmers from Mexico who lost their land to climate change." The Vegans specifically requested experienced agricultural specialists. Kethavar's internal organs flickered, with what his species displayed as embarrassment. 6 months ago, I would have assumed they couldn't afford passage off their homeworld. Now I know they're probably wealthier in practical knowledge than most galactic nobility. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The punishment designed to humble Kethavar had instead opened his eyes to capabilities he had never imagined. Human adaptability wasn't just a biological trait. It was a mindset that approached every challenge as a problem to be solved rather than an obstacle to be endured. "Family Vasquez?" Elena called out as the passengers began emerging from the transport. An older couple approached, their weathered hands and sun-darkened skin telling stories of decades spent coaxing life from reluctant soil. Behind them came 3 adult children and a small cluster of grandchildren, their eyes wide with wonder at the alien architecture surrounding them. "See, we are Vasquez family," replied the patriarch, his Spanish-accented standard careful but confident. "We come to grow food for new worlds." Kethavar stepped forward, his forearms moving in a traditional Zephyrian greeting of respect, a gesture he would never have wasted on humans just months earlier. "Welcome to the Empire, family Vasquez. I am Kethavar, and I will help you reach your new home in the Vegan Confederation. Your expertise in agricultural adaptation has been highly requested by the colony worlds." The old farmer's eyes studied the tall, crystalline alien with curiosity rather than fear. "You help us? This is very kind. We bring tomato seeds from our grandfather's farm and knowledge of growing food in difficult places. We hope to serve well." "Mr. Vasquez," Elena added, consulting her tablet, "the Vegan Agricultural Council has prepared detailed briefings on soil composition and atmospheric conditions on your assigned world. They're particularly interested in your experience with drought-resistant crops." As they walked through the station toward the connecting transport, Kethavar found himself genuinely fascinated by the human family's story. The Vasquez patriarch, Miguel, spoke casually about developing farming techniques that could work in 30-degree heat with minimal water conditions that would challenge even the hardiest Zephyrian agricultural specialists. "On our new world," Miguel explained, "they say the soil is rocky and the rain is rare. This is no problem. On Earth, we learn to make gardens in the desert. Here we will make farms among the stars." Meanwhile, 3 sectors away, former manager Thulnak was discovering his own revelations about human nature. The massive Rigelian had been assigned to assist with human housing projects on the industrial world of Kepler-76, where miners from a dozen species worked the rich asteroid belts that surrounded the system's primary star. The human residential district had been a collection of prefabricated modules barely adequate for basic survival when Thulnak arrived. The humans had taken one look at their assigned housing and immediately begun modifying it. 6 months later, the district had been transformed into something that resembled a small Earth town, complete with gardens, community gathering spaces, and recreational areas that had somehow been carved out of industrial wasteland. "Thulnak," called out Jenny Park, the human district coordinator, "come see what the Morrison family did with their HAB module." The Rigelian lumbered over to where Jenny stood, admiring a standard residential unit that had been completely transformed. What should have been a simple rectangular box now sported a small greenhouse extension, decorative panels made from recycled mining equipment, and a tiny front yard where earth flowers bloomed in carefully adapted soil. "How is this possible?" Thulnak rumbled, his voice filled with genuine amazement. "Regulations specifically prohibit modifications to residential structures." Jenny grinned, her human features bright with pride. "Ah, but the regulations don't prohibit improvements that don't compromise structural integrity or safety systems. The Morrisons are both engineers. They found ways to enhance their living space within the legal parameters. And look at this." She led him around to the back of the modified HAB unit, where a small hydroponic garden produced fresh vegetables in a space that should have been empty storage. They're not just feeding themselves, they're sharing fresh produce with their Andromedan and Centaurian neighbors. Mrs. Morrison is teaching alien kids how to grow tomatoes. Thulnax, rocky features creased in thought. On Rigel, we would have simply accepted the assigned housing and lived within its limitations. That's the difference, Jenny explained. We don't accept limitations, we work around them. Sometimes the workaround becomes better than the original plan. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a small group of children, human, Andromedan and Rigelian youngsters playing together in the narrow space between HAB modules. They chattered in a mixture of languages, their games requiring no translation as they raced around with toy spaceships and practiced the complex hand-clapping games that human children seemed to invent wherever they went. A young Rigelian girl, her stony skin still soft with youth, ran up to Thulnak with excitement. "Uncle Thulnak! Uncle Thulnak! Maya taught us a new song, listen." Without waiting for permission, she launched into a nursery rhyme that had originated on Earth centuries ago, but now rang out in the voice of a child who had never seen a blue sky or a yellow sun. The sight stopped Thulnak in his tracks. The children didn't see species differences as barriers. They saw them as interesting variations in an extended family. The human children taught their alien friends about Earth culture, while learning about distant worlds they might never visit. The prejudices and assumptions that had shaped his thinking for decades simply didn't exist in these young minds. "Jenny," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something. Why do humans adopt alien children? I've seen it happening throughout the district. Human families taking in orphaned aliens, raising them as their own." Jenny's smile softened. "Because that's what families do. They take care of each other regardless of blood or species. Those kids need homes and love. What else matters?" As if summoned by their conversation, the Morrison family emerged from their modified HAB unit, their human children playing alongside a young Centaurian orphan they had recently adopted. Mrs. Morrison called out to the mixed group of children in her accented standard, reminding them about dinner time with the casual authority of a parent who saw no difference between her biological and adopted offspring. Thulnak watched the scene with growing understanding. The punishment he had received wasn't really punishment at all, it was education. He was learning to see what the Empress had known all along, that strength came not from physical power or technological superiority, but from the ability to build bridges between different kinds of minds and hearts. The humans weren't just surviving in their new galactic home, they were transforming it. One family, one friendship, one small act of kindness at a time. And somehow in the process they were transforming everyone around them as well. 1 year after the jewelry store incident, the Galactic Council convened for its annual assembly on the neutral world of Harmony Station. Representatives from every major species in the Empire gathered in the massive spherical chamber that rotated slowly to accommodate the various gravity requirements of its diverse occupants. The agenda included routine trade agreements, territorial disputes, and budget allocations, but the most anticipated item was the presentation of the annual integration report. Counselor Vectar, now approaching his 400th year and still serving as the Emperor's chief advisor, stood at the central podium. His ancient Arcturian features showed the wisdom of centuries as he activated the holographic displays that would tell a story no one had expected when the year began. "Esteemed colleagues," his voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic enhancement systems. "The data we present today represents the most dramatic social transformation in recorded galactic history, all stemming from what initially appeared to be a simple incident of customer service failure." The first holographic display showed immigration statistics that defied all previous models. Human population in the Outer Rim colonies had increased by 400%, but more remarkably, applications for settlement in human-majority areas from other species had increased by 600%. Colony World New Geneva, Vectar explained, was established 18 months ago as a standard mining operation with a projected population of 50,000 diverse settlers. Today it hosts nearly 200,000 residents, with waiting lists extending 5 years into the future. Representative Silthara, from the Centaurian delegation, raised one of her 4 arms. "Counselor Vectar, Our analyses suggested that rapid population growth would strain infrastructure and create social conflicts. How has New Geneva avoided these problems? The display shifted to show aerial views of the colony that resembled something from human mythology rather than a typical imperial settlement. Carefully planned neighborhoods integrated different architectural styles to accommodate various species, while green spaces and community centers dotted the landscape. What should have been a utilitarian mining town looked more like a carefully designed city. The answer lies in human urban planning principles, Vectar replied. Rather than segregating species by biological requirements, human planners focused on creating mixed communities based on shared interests and complementary skills. Rigelian miners work alongside human engineers. Andromedan scientists collaborate with Zephyrian artists. Vegan agriculturalists share knowledge with human farmers. The implications rippled through the chamber as delegates absorbed the significance. Traditional imperial colonies were organized by species, with each group maintaining separate districts and limited interaction. The human approach was creating something entirely new, truly integrated communities where species barriers were becoming largely irrelevant. Representative Gorthak from the Rigelian Federation leaned forward, his massive rocky frame creaking slightly. What about cultural preservation? Surely this integration threatens the unique traditions of each species. Vectar smiled, an expression that looked surprisingly youthful on his ancient features. An excellent question. Observe. The holographic display now showed a festival taking place in New Geneva's central square. Traditional Rigelian stone carving demonstrations occurred alongside Zephyrian light-singing performances. Human children learned Andromedan mathematics while Centaurian youngsters practiced earth martial arts. Instead of cultural homogenization, the scene showed a magnificent tapestry of traditions being shared and celebrated together. Cultural exchange has actually strengthened individual traditions, Vectar explained. When Rigelian youngsters teach their stone carving to human children, they must articulate techniques that were previously passed down through instinct. When humans share their music with Zephyrian artists, both species discover new forms of expression. But the most dramatic statistics came next, as the display showed economic data that challenged fundamental assumptions about imperial productivity. Integrated colonies are outperforming single-species settlements by an average of 250% across all measurable metrics, Vectar announced. Agricultural output, manufacturing efficiency, scientific innovation, and even crime prevention statistics all favor the integrated model. Representative Kexnara from the Vegan Confederation clicked her mandibles in skeptical patterns. These numbers seem impossible. How can mixed populations be more productive than specialized settlements? Because, came a familiar voice from the chamber's royal viewing platform, humans don't think in terms of limitations. Emperor Zarthax himself had entered the chamber, his massive draconian form commanding immediate attention from every delegate. Beside him stood Empress Sarah, her simple human appearance a stark contrast to the elaborate alien forms surrounding them, yet her presence somehow dominated the space through pure force of character. My wife has taught me something that took me centuries to understand, the Emperor continued, his voice carrying both authority and genuine affection. Other species ask what can we do with what we have. Humans ask what do we need to do and how can we make it possible. Sarah stepped forward to address the assembly, her voice clear and confident despite the thousands of alien eyes focused on her. When I was insulted at that jewelry store a year ago, the clerk made assumptions based on my appearance and species. He saw a human and thought primitive, poor, unimportant. But that incident forced our entire civilization to question what we think we know about each other. The holographic displays shifted to show footage from across the empire. Centaurian mathematicians working with human intuitive problem solvers to crack encryption codes that had been unsolvable for decades. Rigelian strength combined with human engineering, creating construction techniques that were revolutionizing architecture. Andromedan precision paired with human creativity producing art that neither species could have imagined alone. We've learned that our differences aren't barriers to overcome, Sarah continued. They're tools to combine. When you put a human engineer in a room with a Zephyrian artist and a Rigelian craftsman, they don't just work together. They create something that transcends what any of our species could accomplish alone. Representative Thulmara from the Arcturian Union, one of the oldest and most traditional delegates, spoke with the careful weight of millennia. Your Majesty, these changes challenge systems that have maintained galactic stability for thousands of years. How do we know that this integration won't lead to the loss of what makes each species unique? Emperor Zarthax exchanged a look with his human wife, and for a moment, the most powerful couple in the galaxy seemed like nothing more than two beings who had found something beautiful in their differences. Because, Sarah replied, diversity isn't threatened by cooperation, it's strengthened by it. My husband and I didn't become less draconian and less human by falling in love. We became more ourselves by sharing our worlds with each other. The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the profound implications of what they had heard. The jewelry store incident had been a catalyst, but the real transformation had come from a simple human concept. That strength came not from isolation or dominance, but from building bridges between different kinds of minds. As the formal session concluded and delegates began the complex process of updating imperial integration policies, quiet conversations began throughout the chamber. Plans were made, partnerships proposed, and barriers questioned. The humans had done it again, not through conquest or coercion, but by simply demonstrating that there was a better way to live among the stars. The boy who had once mocked a human woman's credit limit was now helping human families find new homes among alien neighbors. The manager who had dismissed human customers was now working alongside human engineers to build better communities. And throughout the galaxy, the ripples of change continued to spread. One friendship, one collaboration, one shared dream at a time. 5 years after the jewelry store incident that had changed the galaxy, Sarah Chen stood once again in the Universal Jewelry Emporium. But this time, she was not alone, and the store itself had been transformed beyond recognition. Where once crystal displays had showcased cold perfection, now warm lighting illuminated pieces that told stories. Jewelry that combined the technical mastery of a dozen species, with design philosophies that spoke to hearts rather than wallets. The new manager, a young Andromedan named Kiratel, personally guided Sarah through displays that represented a revolution in both artistry and social consciousness. Your Majesty, this section features our collaboration collection, pieces designed jointly by artists from different species working together. Sarah paused before a necklace that took her breath away. Rigelian stoneworkers had carved microscopic details into crystallized starlight, while Zephyrian light singers had embedded harmonic resonators that made the piece literally sing when worn. Human designers had contributed the flowing, organic curves that made the technically impossible seem naturally beautiful. It's magnificent, Sarah murmured, recognizing the artistry that could only emerge when different forms of intelligence worked in harmony rather than competition. The artist collective wanted you to have it, Kiratel explained, her mandibles clicking in the Andromedan expression of deep respect. They said it represents what you taught us about finding beauty in our differences. Through the store's transparent walls, Sarah could see the space station that had once segregated species by economic level. Now, the Universal Jewelry Emporium sat at the heart of a mixed community where Centaurian children played zero-gravity games with human youngsters, while their parents, representing dozens of species, collaborated on art projects, business ventures, and scientific research that were reshaping galactic civilization. Emperor Zarthax appeared at her side, his massive presence somehow managing to be both protective and gentle as he watched his wife examine the collaborative artwork. The Integration Council's final report was delivered today, he said quietly. I thought you should hear the summary. Sarah looked up from the necklace, her brown eyes reflecting 5 years of watching her simple act of dignity transform into a galactic revolution. Tell me. Human population throughout the Empire has increased 12-fold, but that's not the remarkable statistic, the Emperor began. Interspecies marriages have increased by 3,000%. Mixed species adoption rates have made traditional family structures largely obsolete in the frontier colonies. Most remarkably, crime rates in integrated communities are approaching zero. Sarah's smile carried both satisfaction and a touch of sadness. And the price of all this progress? Remarkably little, Zarthax replied. Some traditional communities have chosen to remain separate, and we've respected that choice. But the economic data suggests that even they are benefiting from the innovations coming out of the integrated colonies. As if summoned by their conversation, familiar voices called out from across the store. Cathavar and Thulnak approached, their forms bearing the changes that 5 years of genuine service had wrought. The Zephyrian's crystalline skin maintained a steady golden hue that spoke of contentment and purpose, while the massive Rigelian moved with the careful grace of someone who had learned to see fragility as something to protect rather than despise. "Your Majesty," Kethvar said, his forearms moving in a gesture that combined Zephyrian respect with human informality. "We heard you were visiting the store. We wanted to thank you." Sarah tilted her head in curiosity. "Thank me? For what?" Tulnuk's rocky features managed to convey emotion that would have been impossible before his transformation. "For teaching us that punishment isn't about making someone suffer for their mistakes. It's about helping them become better than they were." 5 years ago, Kethvar added, "I thought I understood how the galaxy worked. I believed in hierarchies and keeping each species in their proper place. I thought strength meant looking down on others. Now," Tulnak continued, "we work with the Integration Authority by choice. Our sentence ended 3 years ago, but we stayed because this work has meaning. We're helping build something that's never existed before. A truly unified civilization." Sarah's eyes misted slightly as she looked at the 2 former store clerks who had become dedicated public servants. "You're not the same people who insulted a human customer 5 years ago." "No," Kethvar agreed, "we're not. And neither is the galaxy." As if to prove his point, a group of children burst through the store's entrance, a mixed crowd of young beings representing 6 species, all chattering excitedly in the universal pidgin that had evolved in integrated communities. They surrounded Sarah with the casual familiarity that children showed toward adults they trusted, regardless of species or status. "Empress Sarah, Empress Sarah," called out a young Rigelian girl whose rocky skin still showed the soft patterns of youth. "We're on a field trip from school. Teacher says this is where the great change started." A human boy, probably no more than 8 years old, tugged at Sarah's simple dress. "Is it true you made the bad people be nice just by being nice to them?" Sarah knelt down to bring herself to the children's eye level, her movements natural and unguarded despite the presence of Imperial security throughout the store. "I didn't make anyone do anything," she explained gently. "I just tried to remember that every person, every being deserves to be treated with respect and kindness. Even when they're mean to you first?" asked a Centaurian child, her large black eyes reflecting genuine curiosity. "Especially then," Sarah replied. "Sometimes the people who are meanest to us are the ones who need kindness most. They've forgotten what it feels like to be treated well." Emperor Zarthax watched the interaction with the wonder that still overtook him after all these years of marriage to this remarkable human woman. Here was the most powerful person in the galaxy, kneeling on the floor of a jewelry store, teaching alien children about compassion with the same patience she had shown to the clerks who had insulted her years earlier. "Your Majesty," interrupted Admiral Kexthan, approaching with the respectful urgency that marked important news, "the Outer Rim Exploration Fleet has reported something extraordinary from the Andromeda Gateway project." Sarah rose gracefully, her attention shifting to matters of state while the children were gently shepherded toward other displays by their teacher, a mixed group of educators representing 3 different species working together. "What have they found?" Emperor Zarthax asked. "Not found, Your Majesty. Created. The joint human-Arcturian engineering teams have successfully opened a stable wormhole to the Andromeda Galaxy, but they're not asking for permission to explore. They're asking for volunteers to establish the first intergalactic colony ship." The implications hit Sarah immediately. They want to take our integration model beyond our own galaxy. The volunteer list already includes families from 17 different species, Admiral Kexthan continued. They're calling it the Unity Project. They want to carry the lessons learned here to an entirely new galaxy. Sarah looked around the transformed jewelry store, seeing it now as a symbol of something much larger than retail commerce or even social progress. It represented the moment when the galaxy had learned that strength didn't come from keeping different species apart, but from bringing them together. 5 years ago, she said quietly, I came into this store to buy a necklace and was treated like a second-class citizen because of how I looked. Today, children from a dozen different worlds are planning to travel to another galaxy together because they've learned to see each other as family. Emperor Zarthax placed one massive, scaled hand gently on his wife's shoulder. You did that, my dear Sarah. One moment of grace in the face of insult changed everything. No, Sarah replied, her voice carrying the quiet conviction that had first captured the heart of the most powerful being in the galaxy. We all did that. Every person who chose to see past their prejudices, every family who adopted across species lines, every child who made friends without caring about differences. I just gave them permission to be their best selves. As they prepared to leave the store, Sarah paused one final time at the display case where her transformation had begun 5 years earlier. The Viridian sunset stones still glowed with their captured starlight, but now they shared space with creations that no single species could have imagined. Art born from the marriage of different forms of consciousness, the simple human woman who had once been dismissed as unworthy to shop in an upscale jewelry store, was now watching her husband's empire prepare to carry the message of unity to distant galaxies. And it had all started with a smile, a credit chip, and the revolutionary idea that dignity was not determined by species, appearance, or origin, but by the content of one's character. The jewelry store incident had become legend, but the real miracle was what came after, the daily choice, made by billions of beings across the galaxy, to see each other not as alien and other, but as fellow travelers among the infinite stars, each carrying gifts that made the whole greater than the sum of its parts. As Sarah and Zarthax left the store hand in hand, their love story continuing to inspire a galaxy that had learned to embrace difference as strength, the children's laughter echo.